The morning sun cast long shadows across my front yard as Rebecca Holloway, president of the Maplewood Heights HOA, stood in handcuffs. Her perfectly styled blonde hair was now disheveled from struggling against the federal marshals. Her voice, usually so commanding at neighborhood meetings, cracked with desperation as she shrieked about her rights and demanded to see the chief of police. The uniformed officers were unmoved, methodically guiding her toward the waiting patrol car, while crime scene technicians continued documenting evidence inside my house. My neighbor David Kim stepped out of his house, coffee mug in hand, eyes wide with disbelief. He approached one of the officers cautiously and asked what in the world was happening. The marshal's response was blunt, but carried a gravity that made David's jaw drop. "She broke into a federal judge's home. That's a felony." Let me back up and explain how we got here. My name is Jonathan Pierce, and I've served as a federal judge in the Northern District for the past 12 years. After presiding over several high-profile organized crime cases that led to credible threats against my family, I relocated to Maplewood Heights, a gated community on the outskirts of Fairview. The irony wasn't lost on me. I moved here seeking peace and quiet, only to find myself entangled in the pettiest yet most legally significant dispute of my career. When I moved in 6 months ago, I deliberately kept a low profile. My townhouse was modest by neighborhood standards, and I introduced myself simply as Jonathan, a government employee. I attended no HOA meetings, joined no committees, and politely declined every invitation to block parties and book clubs. All I wanted was to come home after long days in court, to tend my small vegetable garden, and enjoy the silence I'd earned. That silence ended 3 months ago when I received my first compliance notice from the HOA. The letter, printed on absurdly fancy letterhead, informed me that my window blinds were not regulation white but off-white, a violation of Section 11.4 of the HOA bylaws. I found this ridiculous, considering the blinds came with the house when I bought it from the previous, fully compliant owner. When I ignored that notice, Week 2 brought complaints about my front light fixture, which supposedly wasn't the right wattage. Week 3 accused me of improperly displaying my small American flag. Apparently, it exceeded the permitted dimensions by 3 inches. By week 4, Rebecca was demanding I remove the bird feeder in my backyard, claiming it attracted undesirable wildlife. Each notice became more aggressive, evolving from friendly reminders to stern warnings to threats of daily fines. What Rebecca didn't know was that I'd spent years dealing with real criminals, mobsters, traffickers, violent racketeers. Her HOA letters barely registered on my radar. I continued to ignore her and focused instead on a complex RICO case on my docket. My silence seemed to drive her mad. She started leaving voicemails at all hours, her voice dripping with syrupy condescension as she reminded me of my responsibilities as a resident of Maplewood Heights. She even showed up at my door one evening, clipboard in hand, demanding we discuss my violations. I firmly but politely told her I would not entertain any accusations without proper legal documentation and closed the door in her face. That's when things escalated from petty to outright criminal. Rebecca began whispering to other neighbors that I must be hiding something sinister inside my home. At the next HOA meeting, she suggested residents who refused inspections might be running illicit businesses or worse. She pushed for mandatory quarterly inspections for all properties, a motion that was narrowly voted down thanks to a few rational board members. Undeterred, Rebecca decided to act on her own. One Thursday afternoon, while I was 60 miles away presiding over a securities fraud trial, she used an old contractor access code she'd somehow obtained to bypass my security gate and enter my home through the back door. Unfortunately for her, my house wasn't protected by an ordinary alarm system. Because of the threats against my family, the U.S. Marshal Service had installed an extensive security network, cameras in every room except the bathrooms, feeding live footage to a federal monitoring station staff 24/7. The moment Rebecca crossed my threshold, she triggered multiple alerts. Federal marshals were dispatched immediately. Meanwhile, oblivious to her impending arrest, Rebecca roamed through my house photographing everything. My bookshelves, my fridge, the contents of my medicine cabinet. She even sat at my desk rifling through legal briefs. Finding nothing scandalous, she staged photos to fabricate violations, the most absurd being a claim that my law books were a fire hazard. The pinnacle of her arrogance came when she placed a bright red violation notice on my nightstand, detailing 22 supposed infractions. She signed it with a flourish and took a selfie in my bedroom, apparently proud of her illicit inspection. By then, the marshals had the house surrounded. I got the urgent call from Deputy Marshal Grant while I was still in court. I immediately recessed, explaining there'd been a serious breach of security at my residence. The 40-minute drive back felt endless. When I arrived, my usually calm street was swarming with federal vehicles. Technicians were dusting for prints and collecting every shred of evidence. Marshal Grant showed me the live security footage. Watching Rebecca roam my house like she owned it made my blood boil like few things ever had. After giving my sworn statement, I called District Attorney Rachel Monroe, a trusted colleague. She listened in stunned silence, then promised to pursue the harshest possible charges. This wasn't just about me being a judge. It was about protecting every homeowner from abusive misuse of authority. The arrest was almost anticlimactic. Rebecca emerged from her house in designer yoga gear, clearly ready for her Pilates session. Her face shifted from mild irritation to horror as the marshals read her rights. Felony breaking and entering, criminal trespass, and impersonation of a federal officer, since she falsely claimed she had legal inspection powers. She shrieked for her husband, her lawyer, the mayor, anyone. The marshals remained stoic, cuffed her, and placed her in the back of a patrol car. By evening, her tear-smeared mugshot was all over the local news. Headlines blared, "Federal Judge's Home Illegally Inspected by HOA President," alongside clips of her rummaging through my personal items. The next morning, Rebecca's bail hearing was held, ironically in the same courthouse where I usually preside, though a different judge handled her case. Judge Lewis, known for his intolerance of abuse of power, set bail at $50,000 and issued a strict no-contact order. That same night, the HOA board held an emergency meeting. With Rebecca barred from attending, Vice President Ethan Walters presided. The board voted unanimously to remove her as president and to issue a public apology to me. They also adopted new rules requiring explicit written consent for any future inspections and revoked all old contractor codes. The criminal case was airtight. Video evidence and federal testimony left Rebecca with no defense. Her lawyer pushed for a plea deal. She pled guilty to criminal trespass and abuse of authority, receiving 2 years probation, 300 hours of community service, and a $10,000 fine. Federal charges for unlawful entry into a protected residence added another year of probation and a $15,000 fine. I then filed a civil suit for invasion of privacy, emotional distress, and violation of my federal protective status. Her homeowner's insurance refused to cover her intentional crimes, so she was left personally liable. Between the criminal penalties, civil damages, and legal fees, Rebecca faced over $150,000 in debt. Her employer, Horizon Realty, fired her immediately for damaging their reputation and violating their code of ethics. Her real estate license was suspended and then permanently revoked after review. She was also banned for life from serving on any HOA board or holding any position involving fiduciary trust. Neighbors who once feared her now avoided her entirely. At her sentencing, she stood before Judge Lewis, a shadow of the tyrant who once bullied the entire block over mailbox colors and garden gnomes. Her apology was hollow, more about how her life had been ruined than about what she'd done. Judge Lewis didn't mince words. He spoke about the sanctity of a person's home and how deeply communities rely on trust in their elected representatives. He made clear her actions were not a lapse in judgment, but a deliberate violation of the law and my security. When the bailiff led her away, Rebecca glanced back one last time, eyes darting around the silent courtroom, searching for sympathy she would never find. She had broken into my home hunting for trivial infractions and found only the harsh reality of justice. The power she had hoarded for years collapsed overnight. I still live in Maplewood Heights, tending my garden in peace at last. But the community has not forgotten what happens when power is abused. And neither has Rebecca Holloway, whose name will forever remind people here that no one is above the law.